Reviewing movies is a pain sometimes. You want to make a list of the best movies of the year, but you still haven't seen everything you wanted to. Then suddenly it's February. Some movies came out in January, but still count towards that year's Oscars. Others don't. It's unlike any other medium where the release dates are skewed so often. It's a mess, and I hate it. I don't really like year-end lists to be immediate like this, since it's hard to see every movie before the year's over. But I will try to make something like this every year so they're at least a time capsule of what I think in the moment. Also, I give my big sorry award to Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Maybe you should have actually come out literally sometime this decade. Anyway, here goes. The top 10 movies of the... Frozen 2 is a pretty strong testament that my personal biases can take a movie pretty far. For a film where an entire third is just a boring, filler waste of time and Olaf making me wish I was suffocating on the surface of Mars, it's pretty impressive that there are still parts of this movie that make me say, I love this movie more than I hate that people will think I'm a moron for loving this movie. The 20 minutes of this movie where Elsa is by herself are the best part. I know Into the Unknown kicks ass, but Show Yourself just blows it out of the water, and for a sequence like that to be in a Disney sequel is one of a good number of indications that this team was actually trying to tell a good story. One that felt justified instead of coasting on its predecessor's popularity. But still. When you're not there. Disney, what the fuck is this? The Irishman is an impeccably made movie. It's got so many good performances. Each character is amazing to watch in their own unique, entertaining way. The period detail is amazing. You will sometimes believe Al Pacino is in his 40s again. And in retrospect, I love that we're still getting great mob epics in 2019. I just wish it was more restrained in its length. I'm not the kind of guy to turn away a movie for being too long, but 3.5 hours is trying my patience. I feel like a really good editor could make a 3-hour cut that would provide an experience exactly as effective. The thing about Climax is that it's my first exposure to Gaspar Noé, and after seeing it, I'm like, of course it's made by a guy who looks like he wants you to shove him up your ass. Gaspar Noé looks like if Mike Stocklasa did porn, and Climax is him shoving my face against a wall of sandpaper and violently shaking it. I love it. It's got this constant thumping soundtrack through the whole thing, as the cinematography, while constantly fantastic, devolves into more lurching movements and long takes that make 1917 look like baby's first Birdman, the longer the characters fall under the influence. Most of these actors aren't even actors, they're dancers, but they still do a fine job. For so many of these scenes, you're like a fly on the wall watching real events happening in front of you. There's nothing about it that comes across as fake. It's not for everyone. A good half of the movie is just people writhing in pain. There's a lot of scenes where Sofia Boutella just goes for broke, throwing herself around the room. If you like a movie that'll make you feel like this, for an hour and 40 minutes, then check out Climax. Marriage Story seems like such a simple title, but after watching it, I'd amend that description to Understated. Being simple means everything is all laid out for you, and while Understated has a similarly plain exterior, it hides something more complex beneath the surface. The two lead performances handle this fantastic balancing act between knowing how much of their emotions to show in relation to what they're saying. Sometimes their emotions say much more than their words. Sometimes their words are just stream of consciousness. Sometimes their words want to say something, but the emotions don't want to admit they're as hurt as they actually are. It's about how complicated love and the fallout of soured love are until Laura Dern comes in to act like a wine mom who has a link to Amy Dunn's Cool Girl rant as her Twitter bio. Little Women is the kind of movie that takes even my cynical, doomsday, self-loathing ass for a walk and says, no, you are uplifted now. You're going to feel good, whether you like it or not. What I love about Greta Gerwig movies is that both of them, you can tell the story is so born of personal experience. Little Women is a book, yeah, but she's not afraid to use her own experience to enhance the humanity of her films. And it has every kind of cinematic woman character to ever exist. You got women played by Saoirse Ronan, you got women played by Laura Dern, you got women who die halfway through the film. In all seriousness, this is a substantial improvement over Lady Bird, which I would still consider great. I love how Greta Gerwig is a woman director with the kind of popularity where you don't necessarily have to be on film Twitter to know her name, because there aren't too many of those. For some reason, people still like to complain about her popularity, but if we got rid of like Todd Phillips and got another director as good as Greta Gerwig in his place, it's like, hell yeah, now we got business. I feel like 2019 was a year where a lot of filmmakers who made their debut came back around to say,
You thought it was over.
Like you had Us, Little Women, now Uncut Gems, which might burn a small hole in your colon before it's over, but it's totally worth it. Beneath the perfectly anxious cacophony of angry people yelling and Adam Sandler telling this guy he's gonna come, there is a complex morality tale of greed just begging to be examined. Adam Sandler's performance and the film at large will haunt you long after it ends. The Safdies are such fantastic directors. They got good performances out of athletes, rappers, and just regular people who haven't acted before. It's just a shame that not a single member of the Academy has ever seen this film. You know how I know Parasite is pretty good? It's because it rode the hype train through the land of degeneracy known as film Twitter. And I was still like, yeah, this movie's pretty good. In all honesty, there is nothing in Parasite I can point to and say that really took me out of the movie. In terms of movies where all the pieces of the filmmaking puzzle come together, you won't find many better examples, no matter how deep you want to read into it, whether that's a half-hearted watch among friends or delving into the sheer perfection in the writing and production design, there is something for you to enjoy. Director Bong Joon-ho just has this masterful grasp on tone, which is, I think, ultimately why it all comes together. It sounds so simple. Make the funny moments funny. Make the tense moments tense. Be dramatic when you have to. But Parasite just Tokyo drifts back and forth between these tones with expert execution. It's one of the most accessible foreign language films ever made and will inevitably be studied in film schools for years to come. I might have only put Once Upon a Time in Hollywood at number 3, but this is definitely the most fun I've had watching any movie this year. Cliff Booth driving around Los Angeles set to a soundtrack of absolute bangers. Sharon Tate dancing like a car dealership balloon. Rick Dalton burning the Manson family alive with a flamethrower. Come on! How the f*** are you having a bad time watching this? At this point, praising the production design is redundant, but that's not all the movie does to pull you in. It's the way the film revels in it and shows it off. Every single person in the film is fully fleshed out, even if they have a minute of screen time. Nobody is a filler character. I think I like this movie in part so much because it shows Tarantino as a filmmaker of actual substance, not just a twitchy weirdo who can kill people good. It's one of his very rare movies where you see the emotional highs and lows of the characters, and he pulls it off with such aplomb. It's one of the few movies I could do a commentary track for because every scene I can easily point something out as amazing, but most of them would pale in comparison to Cliff Booth breaking this girl's nose with a dog food can. Between Midsommar and Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, it was tough to decide for the number 2 spot. And look, the latter is a fun time, but Midsommar is a wholly healing experience in ways people don't often consider. When you say a movie heals you, we often turn towards stuff like Little Women, right? Great film, but its methods of remedy are exclusively pathetic, through emotional warmth. That's a valid way to process your inner turmoil, but it doesn't always work. Midsommar is a different type of healing in the way that violently purging your trauma is. Lovely as comfortable healing can be, it's not always going to do anything to help. Holding on to these toxic things in the expectation of just running their course, like the dead-end relationship in the film, will yield no results. There are times where the only way to reconcile the fallout of your past is nothing less than expelling it all in a debilitating emotional meltdown. You have Florence Pugh, by the end, writhing in complete and utter despair. Her emotions have taken over her, pouring out in a miserable, burdened stream of consciousness. The entire movie, she's forced it down beneath the expectations of so many other people, when in truth she's only pulled the bowstring back further and further for a more powerful release. But she is surrounded by a community of people sharing her experience, wordlessly guiding her through her incoherence, simply by being there. The story of Midsommar is not to be taken completely literally. Ari Aster is not proponing you burn your boyfriend alive because he was drugged and forced to impregnate a pagan girl. The amount of people using this movie to throw shade at their exes weaponizes the idea of therapy. Oh, and if the similarities the film has to other movies like The Wicker Man bothers you, I offer you the most dismissive of whatever's possible. Even if it isn't the most subtle movie when it comes to the sequence of events, I love everything about how it was made, how its euphoric madness took the general public outside their comfort zone. But through all of that, Midsommar builds and builds past the ugliness, the shame, the raw embarrassment of violently purifying yourself of emotional pain. By the end, you've charred away the rough edges of your emotional burdens, and for the first time in who knows how long, letting the open air tenderly brush against your soul, allowed to breathe because you couldn't spend another second without taking everything that hurts you, every bit of your trauma, and throwing it into a fucking fire. It's a humbling experience watching The Lighthouse. Not only is it a film so good, I can hardly imagine the human mind being capable of conceptualizing its Marianas Trench level of depth, but I know that I will have to spend years honing my skills as a writer to describe even half of my love for the film. It's not just good. Every aspect of this movie is so well done, if you were to quantify it on a bar graph, they'd shoot into the stratosphere. It is a movie with such thoughtfully specific, executed filmmaking. Just watching it, you know the only logical explanation is that the director is a complete maniac. Robert Eggers' absolute control over this project is the difference between the story being geniusly vague and random bullshit. It's like The Shining. You know Kubrick planned every last detail in his films, to the point where there are documentaries full of people insisting the smallest details add to the film's meaning. Likewise, The Lighthouse's vagaries encourage further discussion. Robert Pattinson and Willem Dafoe gave the two best performances of last year, their characters layered with so much muddled history to unpack. There are so many ways to interpret the story, but it doesn't force you to build your theories on shaky, minuscule details. Either way you look at it, The Lighthouse is an ambient, eerie film destined to be a classic. Everything is good about this movie. Everything.